Hello and welcome to Primetime. Does it ever feel like your phone is listening to you when you see ads for things you've just been thinking or talking about buying? In recent months, Primetime has been trying to investigate why that happens, the data and technology that can drive those marketing campaigns.
Checking the news on your phone, tracking your steps, planning a holiday. In the background, all sorts of information about us is bundled and packaged and sold. But exactly what data is bought and sold from our smartphones? How specific is it? And should we be concerned?
Tonight, Primetime's Kate MacDonald looks at one of the most revealing types of data about us that is collected and uncovers the serious risks that data poses, not just to us, but to our national security. Here's Kate's investigation.
These are the real movements of phones across Ireland. Real people going about their daily routines. Behind the scenes, some of the apps we use track and collect our locations and sell them on a global market.
Tonight, we reveal how we gained access to a data set showing the movement of tens of thousands of Irish phones from companies who say this data is anonymous. We show how it took us just minutes to trace those dots to the home addresses of real people.
We found multiple devices appear in government buildings, in secure military sites, prisons, hospitals, and more.
And tonight we ask what could happen if this data ended up in the wrong hands.
At the Irish Museum of Modern Art, artists are exploring how technology shapes our lives and the sense of unease that often comes with it. Technology's place in society is the story of our time, but the story is confusing in parts and overwhelming in others. Sometimes it feels like our devices are monitoring us, collecting all types of information about us based on our online activity.
It comes from really seeming innocuous places. Like it can come from your weather app, it can come from your fitness app or from gaming sites. And so ad tech, the system takes all these little bits of information. Ad brokers pick it all up, they bundle it, they build this really detailed picture of what you're interested in and what you might do next. And then they sell it. And they sell it so that you get these things called personalized ads.
Building and selling these profiles has created a business model that some analysts describe as deeply concerning.
If you go to a trade show of the online advertising and marketing industry, and you'll get the most remarkable statements saying, we have profiles of 3 billion people and we have these data points. And what their message is that they have better data than anyone else. They are competing on the level of intrusion into our privacy.
With such concerns in mind, we want to see what type of information is being sold about Irish smartphone users. So we set up a website posing as a Dublin-based data analytics company, and we began contacting data brokers. These are firms you've probably never heard of that collect information from apps and elsewhere, package it, and sell it on. We saw that most of what's traded is about user behaviour, which is anonymised and hard to track back to an identifiable individual. But one type of information stood out to us: location data.
It wasn't the most commonly available data, but the suppliers we initially spoke to said it would show exactly where smartphones had been. So we dug deeper.
We are a location intelligence provider. What we do is that we provide geospatial data sets.
We said we were interested in buying raw location data for an upcoming marketing project. We found it was being collected by companies in the European Union, but being used for a variety of purposes.
First, a retailer wants to know what is the footfall around his retail shop on a weekly basis, monthly or quarterly basis. Second, cross-visitation happens. Before visiting his retail shop where the customer was, after visiting his shop or retail point of interest where he went. and then work and home location analysis.
The company said they could supply data from around 9% of smartphones in Ireland. They said the data was collected from things like weather apps, news and entertainment apps, gaming apps, dating apps, and more.
It collects raw mobility data, the pings which are the GPS pings which are coming from the apps, and partnership with close to 3,500 app publishers. Globally, on an average, I would say 1 to 2 billion pings daily we collect.
The data that's collected, they said, is in line with EU privacy laws because users give the apps in question consent to track their locations.
What makes big difference is sometimes the consent of people regarding the countries, the rules and stuff like that. Also, we want to be GDPR, we are GDPR fully compliant, of course.
After a few more calls and emails back and forth, the company agreed to give us a sample of its data. We were provided with raw location data, which the company said covered the whole of Ireland for 2 weeks in April this year. They said it showed the movement of about 64,000 Irish devices. We didn't pay for the sample, but the company offered us the full package for roughly €42,000 annually. That would have given us access to the movements of devices with a time delay as short as 24 hours.
Christo Mikkonen is a software developer and data analyst. We enlisted his help to make sense of the millions and millions of rows of data we now had access to.
So we had billions of these coordinates across the island of Ireland, and just looking at them as like rows on a spreadsheet was not very useful. But also it's physically so much data that most mapping software can't actually fit that much data on there. So we had to come up with ways to slice the data, narrow it down, make it smaller so that we could actually find some insights from it.
The company said this data was anonymised, but we wanted to know if we could identify people within it. We began compiling a list of the locations we wanted to focus on. We then drilled down into the data to see which devices popped up there. We started by looking at the paths of all the devices that had moved through Leinster House before we focused on individual phones.
This is the Dáil and other government buildings around Leinster House, and all of these dots now have been inside the Dáil.
Exactly. So every single one of these dots has entered the Dáil and had at least 10 pings in there. So if we zoom out, we can see there's many of them.
We've started in the Dáil, and then we can find from that where they've been over the 2 weeks, their home address, potentially if they're picking up kids from school, where they're going to visit someone, their parents or whatever. This is a serious amount of detail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Data brokers say the trade of this data isn't a breach of privacy. They say personal information like names, addresses and phone numbers is never contained in it. To them, it's just an ID number for the app user and a list of GPS locations, therefore not a breach of privacy law. Most importantly, they point to consent, saying users have already agreed to this through the terms and conditions of the apps, including selling their location data. We wanted to see if people were surprised by the level of detail which is being sold about users.
Yeah, no, that would surprise me. So, I know when you accept, terms and conditions, and if you go in to, choose specific ones, it shows you that's 300 plus are paying for this, 400, and you don't actually realize how many companies are, having your information, which is crazy.
I feel like it's one of them things where you're kind of oh, probably won't happen to me. But then again, it is a bit scary at the same time. It could easily happen to you. You just don't know about it.
Yeah, because sometimes wondering how they get that information.
So there's this thing called consent fatigue. It's very hard to just stay interested in saying no, 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 no. But even if you do say no, it can be really unavoidable for certain apps. Say your child needs to access an educational app with school. How do you get out of that?
I'm a person that doesn't really matter who has my information. I have nothing to hide, and they can't use it against me. But for just having that bit of privacy, it does matter.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dangerous for people dealing with stalkers, for example. I'd be quite concerned.
We examined the movement of devices that appeared regularly in Leinster House. We tracked people in and out of their workplace, to their local supermarket, walking around their local areas, to clubs and homes, allowing us to see the routines of their life. By checking the addresses where they stayed at night against public records, we were able to identify some within minutes. One was a person who works in the parliamentary office of Government TD Barry Ward. The individual did not want to be identified in this report, but did confirm the information in the dataset appeared accurate. They gave us permission to speak to Barry Ward about what we had found.
So this now has been filtered down to just your staff members'
Yeah, and I can
journey.
see that that location is approximately where my office is.
Okay, you can see that level of detail.
Yeah, very clearly. In fact, even on that building, the place in the corridor where my office would be. And as you go in further, it's even more exact. I find it pretty shocking, to be honest with you. I would have had no appreciation that while we all know our phones gather information about us and that it is passed on to third parties, what's really shocked me is the extent to which you can take that data parcel, break it down to an individual, trace the individual's movements to the extent that you can identify where they live, where they work, where they shop, where they go out to eat, where they go out to the cinema, or where they go on a day-to-day basis. That gives you so much information about a person that I think it's actually dangerous.
We were able to see devices going to hospitals, IVF clinics, women's health centres, mental health services, churches and mosques, not to mention children going to school. For privacy reasons, we made the decision not to attempt to identify anyone attending such locations.
Everyone is walking around, and where they're moving in their daily lives is collected in systems that they have no understanding of. The data that you've managed to get is showing the intimate details of these people's lives.
Next, we looked at the phones inside highly sensitive secure sites like military bases, including Hoboken Island. This is Hoboken Island. This is where the naval headquarters are. So all of these dots basically are coordinates, they're pings of devices that have been on this island.
Exactly. They're coordinates that have been on the island and they've pinged at least 10 times. So we filtered out anybody who's just passing through. And people are clearly working in Hoboken Island.
Okay, can you click on one of those and can we filter just for one specific device?
This one here is interesting, as you can see they're out at sea, clearly like on a boat, and as they're getting closer to Ireland, as the phone mats are picking up their signal, then they're trying to transmit their signal back to us so we can follow their coordinates as they're moving along in a boat.
So we've seen within this 2-week period multiple days that this device is in the naval base, on the water, and then potentially going back to their home.
Exactly.
McKee Barracks in Dublin was another site we wanted to examine. The Defence Forces Military Intelligence Service is based there, making it one of the most sensitive military locations in the state. We found multiple devices there that we could track to residential addresses. Similarly, at Garda headquarters, we could follow devices across multiple days, usually during work hours, which then headed back to what appeared to be home addresses.
The data also showed phones travelling from residential addresses into and out of prisons like Mountjoy, Limerick and Cloverhill, as well as the highest security facility in the country, Portlaoise.
Without identifying home addresses, we examined the data from one prison before looking at the path of specific devices.
Okay, so who could this be? This is either someone who is visiting someone in prison, or some kind of contractor or a cleaner, someone who is working at the prison, a prison officer or a prison guard.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're showing up here multiple days at different hours.
A lot of nighttime hours as well, so like potentially someone doing night shift.
Yeah, and you can see here that they're actually quite deep into the prison wings as well.
We know that there are dangerous figures in prison who might want to be able to access information in relation to Irish Prison Service staff, for example, Gardaí, particularly those involved in sensitive investigations. The notion that the information about their movements is free and available to buy for anyone is frightening, totally inappropriate and definitely dangerous.
We showed the data to former independent TD Cathal Berry. Before entering politics, he was the military governor of Portlaoise Prison and the head of the Irish Defence Forces Special Operations Unit.
There is risks, obviously, for sure, particularly for specialised people in our armed forces, like particular pilots, bomb disposal operators, captains of ships, this type of thing. From a routine point of view, it makes perfect sense that people use mobile phones. But from an operational perspective, there is a risk of compromise there. And that's something we need to tighten up on, I think, judging by the data you provided.
And what are those risks in terms of, I guess, the risk to national security, but also the risks to personnel themselves?
Yeah, well, you're aware of tiger kidnapping, I mean, of former bank managers or prison guards or whatever. So if people know where your home address is, then you're at risk there from that point of view, particularly if you're in quite an elevated position in the public service, in the part of the state apparatus.
In a statement, the Defence Forces said the safety and security of its personnel, locations and operations are of paramount importance, and added that as a learning organisation, it will continue to review and update its policies and procedures in relation to emerging technologies.
The data didn't just show movements in buildings like the Dáil or secure military sites or prisons. In this sample, a device turned up at the home of the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan.
The device visited the minister's home on 5 separate dates within the 14-day sample we were given. It does not appear to belong to the minister or his family, but instead to someone who attended his home regularly.
We did not attempt to identify this person, but the fact that we could have potentially tracked them over time raises serious questions over the availability of this data.
In a statement responding to the safety concerns of staff in secure sites, prisons and guard stations, the Department of Justice said it affords the highest priority to the state's security and to the security of individuals. For sound operational reasons, it is not the practice to comment on the detail of security matters.
There are nefarious actors out there. You have the state actors who will take full advantage of this type of information, and we have to be mindful of that. You have the non-state actors, which would be organised criminals. We have them in Ireland. You have drug cartels operating off our coast. You have subversives who would very much really like to have specific information.
Data brokers operate legally in the ad tech industry because, in many cases, app users accept terms and conditions that permit tracking. But the law requires consent to be informed and freely given, and many argue that's not really happening.
I don't believe any of the people in your data set understood that they were giving consent for that level of information about them, about their phone and where it is and when it's there to be used by a third party.
We are absolutely meant to be protected by law against this activity. The problem is that the enforcer, the Data Protection Commission, has entirely failed for years to address this in any meaningful way. The enforcer has the power. They can go to a court, get a warrant, and they can kick doors down. They have awesome powers to investigate. We need to see them actually use them.
To me, it feels wrong, and if something feels wrong, it shouldn't be legal. So this is where the regulators come in, and this is where our politicians come in, to make sure that we have the appropriate guardrails in place, that people's data isn't being exploited. Like, Ireland really is a major hub for data at the moment, and we should be leading the world in this regard.
In a statement, the Data Protection Commission said it first became aware of this matter when contacted by Primetime, and we are extremely concerned by it. Information about an individual's location can pose a serious risk to their security and well-being. We are currently working to identify the data broker in question, and if they are headquartered in Ireland, we will take action ourselves. However, if they are headquartered in another EU country, we will engage with the relevant data protection authority to deal with the matter.
Location data is just one of several types of data which can be used to try to build a detailed picture of how we live. Its availability raises questions not just about personal privacy, but about national security. Because it doesn't technically breach any laws, it seems something will need to be changed if apparent concerns are to be resolved.
I think there's an obligation on the DPC to investigate it. If there is more legislation or more regulation required, then come to to Leinster House, come to the government, come to the politicians. We will change that, because we cannot allow our citizens to be exposed to that level of intrusion into their personal private lives where corporations have no business going.